Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Izuku walked through the street with his new jacket that he may or may not have stolen, but in his defense he had no choice. He doesn't have much clothes, and he was just recently discovered by the heroes, and he can't let them take him home. They'll find out his quirk is all for one, and he has been taking the quirks of thugs, which is why he is also thankful he had that hair grow quirk to alter his hair. He likes it white instead of green. As to why he was walking through the street. Well, he was going to Himaki's cafe, the girl he had helped yesterday. Maybe they could be friends? Izuku isn't really good in social situations, only knowing how to persuade others to leave him alone or that he is fine. He doesn't even know if him and that girl even have a friendship. But Izuku hopes that they do and that she is currently on shift, so he doesn't look like an idiot. Perhaps he could also be given free food by her, as he doesn't exactly have much money to use. Izuku does also feel bad that his main reason to go here was in hopes of getting free food, but sue him for being a little bit selfish once in a while. Izuku walks into the cafe he was told that she works at and entered. Izuku looked around, trying to not make himself noticeable and actually paying attention to others this time. Because last time he didn't got him nabbed by a hero. Izuku won't let that happen again. He walked into the cafe and immediately spotted Himaki working. She had a smile on her face that made Izuku happy, knowing that this was probably her first time smiling because of her dumb quirk. Izuku also was thankful that he had hit his limit with his quirk for the time being, so he didn't have to give this wretched quirk to anyone else, and he wasn't affected by it. Izuku walked over to her, and Himaki noticed. "Hey Izuku, glad to see that you came." Himaki smiled brightly. Izuku returned her smile. "Hey Himaki, it's good to see you smile. How have you been?" Izuku asks. Himaki's smile dwindled slightly, but it didn't disappear. "Well, I'll have to be called to the police because of my whole quirk switch thing. But there isn't much they'll get out of me. Don't worry, I won't reveal your little secret, Izuku," Himaki said, coming closer to Izuku and whispering the last part. Izuku couldn't help but be thankful for that. The two continued to talk, Himaki gifting Izuku a free cookie. It wasn't much, but Izuku wasn't going to complain. He found out that they were looking for a singer to entertain the crowd at night. Izuku was offered, but he has no singing ability, so he just left the offer floating. The two were having a nice time until a scream caught the two's attention. "What was that?" Izuku asked. "I'm not sure. Can you go check that out?" Himaki asked. Izuku nodded his head and left the cafe. The cry sounded like it was on the other side of the cafe, so Izuku walked into the alleyway that led to the back. Cautiously, Izuku peeked around the corner. There was 4 people in the alleyway. 3 of them were girls. One had a beautiful white dress and golden blonde hair. The second was a girl with jet black hair and a red skirt, and the last one had blue hair and blue shirt and skirt. They were standing in front of a boy who was trapped in a box of light. His skin was jet black, and he had dyed green hair. Izuku watched as the girl with golden hair crouched down and start tapping on the box of light. "Hey there, freak. How does it feel to be caged? You better get used to it. Things like you should have never crawled out of that hole," the girl said. The boy curled further into himself and pushed himself up against the wall. The girl with black hair started to laugh. Izuku felt incredibly angered, but he couldn't just charge in. Unless Izuku was going to outlive them, they were going to know what he looks like. The only reason Izuku wasn't worried about that before, because when the guy had grabbed him, he already knew what he looked like. In this situation, Izuku would attack them, and they'd have full view of him. It's not like he can add articles of clothing to himself whenever he wants. But what if it wasn't clothes? Izuku hasn't really tested his new heavy skeleton quirk, but the idea should definitely allow him to make a makeshift mask. Izuku stepped back and focused on that quirk. He can feel his bones shifting uncomfortable underneath his skin before slowly. Something cold is touching his skin. When Izuku stopped, he reached up and touched his face. It was hard and metallic. It had worked. Izuku then put his hood up over his head before he walked into the alleyway. "What's going on here?" Izuku asked, making his voice as deep as possible. All 3 girls turned around. The girl with golden blonde hair looked at Izuku, annoyed with her bright blue eyes. But Izuku also notices another detail. Her freckles were glowing. Izuku looked at the box again and saw that the corners had a small orb of light. She was probably the one who created the box, and her quirk probably works similarly to constellations. The girl with black hair looked confused and upset as she narrowed her eyes at Izuku. Izuku then looked over to the last girl with blue hair. She looked scared. She looked around at her friends before working backwards. Odd. She doesn't seem the same compared to the other two. None of your business, pal. Unless you want to be stuck like the freak over there, the girl with golden hair said. Izuku frowned, but got an idea. She seems to be quirk bias, and her quirk is probably flashy and effective for hero work. So she'd obviously be a prick about it because no one is going to stop her. So Izuku is willing to try something. You think you're stronger than me? Let's compare and see if you're as good as you seem to think, Izuku said. The girl smiled smugly and walked over to Izuku. The girl with the blue hair, however, put her arm cautiously on the obvious leader's shoulder. Wait, I don't think it's a good idea, she said quietly. The girl frowned before elbowing the girl in the face. She yelped and clutched her nose before falling to the ground. Izuku widened his eyes in shock. That girl was only trying to warn her, but ended up getting hit. Shut up, I'm the best and you know it. Don't try and act like you're better than me, she said angrily before turning back to Izuku with a smug smile. She walked up to him with her hands on her hips. So you think you're hot, big boy? What's your quirk? She asks. Based all around her quirks, Izuku wasn't surprised. He can tell who those types of people are by just being around them. It isn't entirely their fault, as everyone, including teachers, encourage their actions their entire life. But she acts differently. Izuku isn't exactly sure why or how he can tell, but it's just a sense that he is getting from her. He doesn't understand, but he isn't going to ignore his gut instinct. Izuku raises his hand and points his palm upwards. Are you sure you want to test what I can do? Izuku asks. Tora, please don't. The girl with blue hair pleads from the ground. Tora ignores her and smirks at Izuku. She raises her hand and places it on top of Izuku's. Go ahead, you get one shot before I kick your butt, she said. Izuku smirks as he feels her quirk loose from the consent she has given him. Without any hesitation, Izuku takes the girl's quirk. Izuku watches as the freckles on the girl's face stop glowing and her box disappear instantly, freeing the boy with black skin. Izuku smirks, raises his hand, showing her a glowing light. It was white with golden swirls covering it like an atom. Thanks for your quirk, Izuku said. The girl's eyes widen. Fear flashes across her face. She reaches up to her face and starts picking at her freckles. Izuku presumes something is supposed to happen. When nothing does, she looks at Izuku with unimaginable fury. What did you do to me? Give it back, she yelled. Izuku shook his head and brought his hand up to his chest, closing his hand. Don't think so, Izuku said, feeling a sense of pride at the look of horror on the girl's face. Izuku knows it was wrong, but people like this, people who believe they are heroes, yet abuse others finally getting served justice, is pure pleasure for Izuku. It's justice. The second girl then looked furious. She raised her hand, and a spear that seemed to be formed of pure energy appeared in her hand. Give her back her quirk, you villain, she yelled, and threw the spear. The spear crashed Izuku in the face, making him stumble back a step, but thanks to his metal mask, Izuku was fine. Izuku then grew more metal on his body. He made claws and gave himself iron boots. Izuku crashed down before charging at the girl. Izuku moved incredibly fast, faster than what the girl could do to react. Izuku extended his hand and grabbed her face. The girl then screamed before dropping to the floor. He had taken her quirk. I'm calling the police, the blonde girl announced with a shaky voice. Izuku turned around and looked at her. The girl yelped before turning around and sprinting away. Izuku sighed and looked down to the ground where the unconscious girls lay. Izuku withdrew parts of his quirk but kept his mask on. He then looked up to the other two, who both looked terrified. Hey, can you get your friend somewhere? She'll wake up in about an hour, Izuku asked. The blue-haired girl flinched and looked down at her friend. She looked back up to Izuku. You're not going to attack me? The girl asked. Izuku shook his head. No, I have deemed these two unworthy of their quirks. You're different, so you can keep yours. Now go. I don't have all day, Izuku said. The girl nodded frantically. She scrambled over to her friend and picked her up. She then quickly left the alley without looking back. Izuku then turned to the boy with black skin, who was now not looking so scared and was staring at Izuku with wonder. Why did you help me? The boy asked. Why wouldn't I help you? You're human like everyone else. You don't deserve to be ostracized for being born, Izuku answered sympathetically. The boy looked up at him with pure shock and amazement. Thank you, the boy said, not sure on what to say. Izuku chuckled and sat down. He's probably not good with talking to people. Exactly like him. Hey, what's your name? Izuku asked. The boy flinched before smiling sheepishly. Akito Mabinori, the boy answered. Izuku decided to take a risk. He seems like a good guy and Izuku kind of needs friends. Despite having all for one, he does need other people to survive, no matter how much planning he has. Do you have any friends? Izuku asked. Akito looked down and shook his head. Do you want to be mine? Izuku asked. Akito looked up, shocked at what Izuku had just said. Wait, really? The boy asked, not believing it. Izuku nodded. He took his hoodie off, revealing his white hair. He then started removing his metal mask, revealing what he actually looks like. His skin was a light gray and his eyes were an emerald green. He had small purple areas on his chin and triangles on his cheek. Izuku then outstretched his hand. Izuku, let's be friends, Izuku says with a wide smile. The two had then started to hang out. After Akito teleported them away to avoid the police that was coming to the scene, Izuku had found out what his quirk was. It was called Shadow Port, which allows him to teleport to dark areas. A side effect from his quirk is that his skin is permanently black, and because of that and his somewhat villainous quirk, he has been bullied his entire life. Well, not anymore. They had hung out the next day as well. They had gone around the park with Akito buying fish and chips. Izuku was incredibly thankful. They had a good time, and Izuku was happy. He just needed to find a job and a way to change his identity. He'll need help with that, but he's got time. With his change of looks, he'll last for a while before they catch on. Izuku and Akito had said goodbye before going their separate ways. Izuku had considered taking Akito back to his house, but Izuku didn't want him to know that he lives in a dumpster. Also, the fact that Akito doesn't know he is Izuku Yagi, the very one who is missing, doesn't help either. If he ever finds out, however, he can always just bluff and say that kid was quirkless while he wasn't. Some people at Aldera had said that he was quirkless and the case lost a lot of traction, which Izuku was thankful for. They don't know he has all for one, but that doesn't change the fact that his family knows. He can't go home, he can't. As Izuku was walking, his thoughts were distracted by a scream. Izuku, being the hero he was, ran towards it. Aizawa and Naomasa got out of the car. They had stopped in front of a small building near the dock. Aizawa had said that this place sells the painkillers that Izuku had, so this was their first place of investigation. Aizawa walked to the door with Naomasa in tow, then knocked, not wasting any time. After a few seconds, the door opened, revealing a woman. She had long purple hair done up in a ponytail. She had black glasses and a white coat on. She looked like a doctor, but why wasn't she working in the hospital? The woman looked at Aizawa and smiled. Good evening, Eraserhead and Detective. Is something the matter? She asked, concerned as soon as she noticed Naomasa behind Aizawa. Aizawa nodded. Yeah, Doc, can we come in? Aizawa asked. Of course, Doc said, moving to the side and letting the two in. Aizawa and Naomasa thanked her, the latter removing his hat. So what is this about? Doc asked. Aizawa turned to her. Well, you've heard of the missing kid Izuku Yagi. He had access to powerful painkillers that only can be administered in hospitals. You're the only person outside of the hospital can administer it, Aizawa said. Naomasa was now beginning to understand. Aizawa had left him pretty much in the dark. She was an underground doctor. Not many people do this, as it's just less pay. Severely less pay. Did you give him the painkillers, ma'am? Naomasa asked, wanting to use his quirk. Doc shook her head. Sorry, it wasn't me. I only give those to one person, Doc answered. Naomasa nodded his head. His quirk did not activate. Aizawa looked over to him, and Naomasa gave him a thumbs up. Is it possible that this person gave Izuku these toxins? Naomasa asked. I guess, but he isn't the type. I can ask him though, Doc said. Can you get him here? Naomasa asked. Doc shrugged. Don't know. The guy is pretty elusive and uncooperative. Even if he does come, he won't be so happy as he has a deep hatred for heroes, Doc answered, looking over to Aizawa. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. Try me, was all he said. Doc just sighed and went to her desk. Let me call him, she said. Izuku's quirks. Bolt, heavy skeleton, hemomorphy, tentacles, constellation. Not active. Emotive deprive, energy spear. Izuku sprinted to where he heard the scream. The scream had been down an alleyway. Izuku looked down the corner, and his blood ran cold. Two bodies laid in the alleyway. One of them wasn't that far from the entrance, while the second one was all the way down at the end. However, there was someone else down there. They were a girl, couldn't be older than Izuku himself. They had blonde hair done into two messy buns at the top of her head. She was wearing a small skirt and a cream-colored cardigan. But what she was doing chilled Izuku. She sat atop of that dead body. They were pouring out vital fluid, and it covered a lot of her clothes. She held a knife covered in lots of vital fluid and was adamantly licking it. Izuku had to do something, but he didn't know what. This girl had finished two adults, and it looked like with little issue. What was her quirk? From how much Izuku can see from her, there isn't much he can determine. He had to stop her. Izuku can't allow a murderer run free, and this person seems giddy about murdering others. But what was Izuku going to do? She was obviously dangerous and very capable at what she does. Even with his quirks, it might not be good enough to take her down. Wait, his new quirk. Izuku had completely forgotten about it. The quirk from that girl with the glowing freckles. The one he had to save Akito from. Izuku hadn't had time to test it out, but he knows he produces light from freckles that connect together to create barriers. Luckily for Izuku, he has plenty of freckles to use. He also had the energy spear quirk, but he currently can't use it. Not until he figures out how to increase his quirk capacity. That reminds Izuku. He knows this may not be the best time to be thinking about his quirk. There are two dead people with a murderer sucking the vital fluid out of one of them. But Izuku knows no matter how hard he tries, his curiosity will take over him no matter what. Can he take quirks from dead people? It isn't known how quirks work when people die, if they disappear or just sit there, unable to activate. Izuku knows mutant quirks don't disappear after death, but that wasn't too much of a leap to make. But it was obvious that neither of these people have a mutant quirk, so they either have a transformation or emitter quirks. Can he still take their quirk at post-mortem? Izuku slowly creeps into the alleyway, not wanting to alert the girl of his presence. He got low and reaches his hand towards the body before stopping. This person was dead, and he was about to touch them. It was disgusting. Izuku had only now realized the seriousness of this situation. He wanted to puke. The sight before him was horrendous, but he had to hold out. This was a murder situation, and he had to stop her before anyone else got hurt. If he wanted to be a hero, he had to get used to these situations. He had to know how to deal with these situations, because no matter how good people are, there are so many people who are way worse. Izuku covered his eyes and touched the man. Izuku presumed he didn't need to grab the man's face, as he couldn't deny Izuku consent. Izuku felt the familiar rush of a quirk going into his body. The feeling, however, felt fat and refreshing. Izuku was confused at the feeling but couldn't delve deeper into it. He'd be on it all day, trying to figure out his quirk when he can't even use it. Izuku looked up to the girl to see her stabbing the dead body again and licking the vital fluid off of her knife. So her knife was obviously her weapon and use of attack. The body next to Izuku was covered in cut and stab wounds, so if he can protect himself from that, he should be fine. His heavy skeleton quirk should protect him. However, if she has some type of speed quirk, there will be a problem. Izuku will become slower the more metal he creates on his body, and if he can't defeat this girl fast enough. When he gets too tired, the metal slowly disappears back into Izuku's body and leave Izuku immobile. It's a bad drawback if Izuku can't defeat his opponent before that happens. But Izuku always has other quirks he can use, like Bolt, Tentacles, Hemomorphy, and Constellation. They are all more complicated to use, and Izuku still needed more practice. But in this situation, he has to try. Izuku puts his hood up and activates Heavy Skeleton. Iron grows on his body, covering parts of his shoulder, legs, and ribs. He creates claws on his hands that act as a weapon. He can defend himself. Izuku steps up and starts walking to the girl, alerting her of his presence. Izuku expected the girl to be shocked, either become panicked that someone else had saw them, or become eager to silence him. But the girl lit up like a Christmas tree. Izuku watched as her golden cat-like eyes locked onto him and seemed to glow in crazy happiness. Izuku stopped in his tracks as he watched this crazy girl stand up and start jumping with joy. Ow, a new friend. However, you're hiding your face from me. If we want to get to know each other, we have to be more honest with each other, the girl said in a sultry voice that made Izuku shiver. Izuku wasn't sure what was going on, but he didn't like it. The girl got down into a running stance before sprinting at Izuku with her knife, ready to stab him. Izuku was surprised. This girl was fast, like crazy fast. Izuku barely had time to raise his arms in defense as she stabbed him. Her knife clanged with his metal bones. Izuku swung his claw at her, but she ducked with ease. Izuku felt something cut his ear. Suddenly he became aware that his hood had been hit off, giving the girl full view of his face. Izuku felt something wet slide down the side of his face, and Izuku noticed the girl's arm. It looked like she had just thrown something, but it couldn't have been her knife, it was still in her hand. Unless she has more. She definitely has more than one knife. The girl saw him before widening her eyes in excitement. She hopped back, which scared Izuku, and started hopping up and down excited. "Oh my god, you're so cute." She squealed, which both scared and confused Izuku. This girl was insane. She then smiled widely at Izuku, too widely. Izuku saw her fangs, and that's what clicked for Izuku. She needs vital fluid for her quirk. This girl was crazy fast, so her quirk probably increased her speed if she consumed vital fluid. Izuku had assumed she had a speed quirk because of the way she moved. It did confuse Izuku why there wasn't a clear activation notice. Most quirks have visual activations like their eyes glow or they have an aura of light. But she didn't have anything, which confused Izuku. It was possible she didn't have one, but that was very unlikely. For example, Izumi's body glows gold, and the objects she manipulates have the same light of aura. But since she has to consume vital fluid to activate her quirk, it makes more sense. Izuku has heard of a few facts about blood quirks. Like they have to have fake vital fluid made to satisfy the thirst of wanting to drink some. Izuku wonders if others have stronger feelings to consuming vital fluid than others. Does this girl have a problem like that? But you'd look cuter with a bit more red, the girl then stated, her eyes narrowing on Izuku dangerously. Guess those thoughts will have to wait. Izuku quickly turned into an electric bolt and attacked the girl before she got too close. Unfortunately, electricity is unpredictable and he missed, slamming into the wall. Izuku growled and pushed himself off the wall. He then felt something sharp hit the back of his neck. Izuku gasped as he was pushed back into the wall. The pain was null from the knife entering a purple patch of skin. He felt the knife hit the spine in his neck. If it wasn't metal, Izuku would be in trouble. But luckily it was. Izuku activated his quirk and broke the knife with his bones. The girl then backed away, confused on what happened. Izuku didn't let this opportunity slide as he turned around and activated his quirk. A tentacle formed from his left, and it shot out and grabbed the girl. She couldn't avoid it before being lifted into the air. The girl started to struggle. Izuku watched as she reached into her shoe and grabbed another knife and started stabbing the tentacle. Luckily, Izuku couldn't feel it. Izuku used his right hand and reached for his face. His freckles started to glow. He threw out 8 balls of light. The girl slashed the tentacle and managed to release herself. She fell towards the ground, but noticed small lights floating. She fell towards them, and when she was in between them all, they connected. The girl landed on a translucent golden barrier of light. She looked around frantically. Her crazy smile vanished completely. The same barriers surrounded her completely. She started banging on them, but nothing happened. She then stabbed them and got the same result. A sinking feeling registered in her chest. She was trapped. Caught. Izuku sighed in relief as he sat down and put his hand over his heart. Even with 5 quirks, he still struggled to take her down. He really needs to get some practice in actually fighting. He knows he can't rely solely on quirks, but he's never had the opportunity to get lessons before. Now, what to do about this girl? Izuku looked up at the girl trapped in his constellation only to be met with a strange sight. She was crying. It was a complete 180 to what Izuku had seen before from the girl. Perhaps she was upset she was defeated, or was it something else? Izuku got up and walked towards her. The girl didn't look up at him. "Hey, why are you crying?" Izuku asked. The girl cracked a sad smile, and Izuku couldn't help but to feel bad. He hadn't even heard her response yet, and she had just live people? What was he thinking? "It's over. I'm caught. I'll be put into jail for all of the stuff I've done," the girl said. She then started to cry harder. Izuku watched as the girl started to wail, curling herself into a ball. "I'm so sorry, so sorry. I never wanted to turn out like this," she sobbed, her head down in her arms. Izuku felt his heart crack. She doesn't have control of her actions. Izuku has read up a lot of cases, and he has seen several people forced into crime, mainly from their quirk that alters their appearance and makes their needs different from others, like people with bug quirks. Her quirk probably also got her ostracized as well. People are cruel, and her quirk probably required help from a quirk counselor which she didn't get. Izuku knows he should call the police and arrest her. She unalived 2 people. But Izuku can't help but feel that's the wrong choice. It wasn't entirely her fault she finished those 2 people. If Izuku wants to help people, punishing others for something they can't control won't help anyone. Not to mention he has no way of contacting the police, and he is still kind of wanted by the police right now. Izuku sighs and puts his hand on the barrier. Hey, you need vital fluid for your quirk, right? Izuku asked. The girl stopped crying, only sniffling. She looked up at Izuku with sad and confused eyes. Her eyes were red and puffy with several streaks of tears down her cheek. Izuku couldn't help but feel sad at the sight he sees. Yeah, my quirk is called Transform, she said softly before lowering her head again. I can turn into others if I consume their vital fluid, she said quietly. Izuku can hear her sobs again and feel sympathy for her. She was definitely self-conscious about her quirk. If you want to borrow some vital fluid, I can spare you some, Izuku said with a kind smile. The girl looked up to him with eyes full of shock. Izuku couldn't help but think, cute, but knocked those thoughts away. Wait, really? She said, skeptical. Izuku nodded his head. Yeah, just when I release you don't attack me, Izuku said, keeping eye contact and reaching over to a glowing ball of light. The girl nodded her head, looking like a lost kitten and desperately wants to be released. Izuku then pinched the light and destroyed. The barrier cracked like glass, making the girl fall to the ground just in front of Izuku. Izuku quickly helped her upright and made sure she wasn't hurt. The girl had brushed it off. Izuku then raised his arm up and pulled back his sleeve, revealing his mostly purple arm. Okay, bite into here and take some vital fluid. I don't mind, Izuku says. The girl who looked distraught just before just lit up brightly. She grabbed Izuku's arm and grabbed it eagerly. She then opened her mouth wide and bit down on Izuku's arm hungrily. Izuku barely felt a thing thanks to his quirk. They sat in silence for a couple minutes, the girl just hungrily sucking on Izuku's vital fluid. Eventually, she let go with a huge grin on her face, a small drip of vital fluid dripping down the side of her mouth. She looked at Izuku once more, except it had a lot less crazy and hunger in them than before. So what's your name, Stringbin? My name is Himiko Toga, the girl asked, smiling like a cat. Izuku smiles before stopping himself. Would it be a good idea to tell her his name? What is she going to do? Call the police? She found Izuku Yagi while being a murderer. Izuku finds it unlikely that she'll care who he is, and if he is also technically a criminal. He's already told 2 people his actual name, what's one more? Izuku, he answered, not giving a last name. He wasn't a Yagi, never was. Izukuin. It's such a cute name, she said happily, clapping her hands. Izuku was taken aback by her enthusiasm, but he kind of enjoyed it. But then she put a finger to her chin and looked at Izuku with a thinking face. Wait, are you Izuku Yagi? Wasn't he quirkless? She asked. Izuku gulped and looked down. Yes I am, and don't tell anyone I have a quirk. I'm going to be honest, I didn't even know I had it until I ran away, Izuku says. Himiko nodded her head understandingly. Izuku sighed and looked back over to her. He didn't want to ruin the moment, but he had to get back on topic. So Toga, Izuku started. Himiko, we're friends now, Izukuin, she smiled. Izuku blushed, but put his thoughts away. So Himiko, he said, making the teen smile bigger. Izuku looked down as he didn't want to see it disappear. Why did you do this? Izuku asked. He didn't need to be looking at her to know her smile dropped. He felt the tension rise immediately. Izuku looked up to see Himiko running her finger across the ground. It's villainous. My quirk is called Transform, and if I consume another person's vital fluid, I turn into them. I can't help myself. I crave vital fluid, Himiko said. Izuku knows he should probably comfort her, focusing on the last sentence, but his natural quirk geek mind went straight into action. He was a bit surprised she didn't have a speed quirk. She was incredibly fast, but it might be from training. Perhaps Izuku could ask for some tips. Well, that's so cool. Can you use the quirks of people you transform into? Is your limit for your quirk set at the same time or changes, depending on how much vital fluid you've drunk? Izuku asked with stars in his eyes. Izuku looked taken aback, confused of what Izuku had just said. Wait, you don't think it's villainous? Even after Ayuna lived those 2 people. And, attacked you? She asked, her voice becoming quieter near the end. Izuku sighed and shook his head. What you did was villainous, but your quirk is not. You also have little control of your actions as your instinct make you crave vital fluid. It's just as normal as water and food for you, Izuku stated. Himiko looked at Izuku, astounded and touched by what he just said. She then gives a small smile. Thank you. You're the first person to have ever been like that to me, she said. Izuku smiles and rubs the back of his head. No problem, Izuku smiled. Hey, I told you my quirk. It is your turn, Izuku-an, Himiko said, radiating happiness again. Izuku flinches before forcing himself to relax. Himiko won't judge him for his quirk, and it's not like she knows the story of All for One anyway. It's called All for One. It allows me to steal quirks for others and also give them away, Izuku said. Upon hearing this, Izuku jumps forward, pushing her hands onto Izuku's knees. Her face became incredibly close to Izuku's. Izuku quickly became red from embarrassment, especially at the close proximity he was with a girl. So you can give me a quirk? Himiko asked excitedly. Izuku shoots his hands up in front of his face, trying to create an unneeded defense and put some distance between the two. I can't, it's dangerous. Besides, I'm still new to the quirk, Izuku stuttered. Himiko pouted, but nodded her head nonetheless. She moved away from Izuku, still sitting close to him, but now on her knees. But Izuku had just gotten an idea from his quirk. He's not sure if it will work, but it's worth a shot. Hey Himiko, can I try something? Izuku asked. Himiko instantly nodded her head. Of course, Izuku-an. You helped me, and I want to help you, Himiko said. Izuku shrugged slightly as he raised his hand towards her. This isn't really helping me, Izuku said before touching Himiko. Izuku then felt the sensation of gaining a quirk. The quirk felt dry and needy but extremely flexible. Izuku decided to dive deeper into the quirk to see what it exactly was all about. He scanned around and found it was relatively a straightforward quirk. However, Izuku did find some concerning details, specifically the emotions attached to the quirk. The first one was the need for vital fluid. It was a huge aspect of the quirk, concerningly huge. No wonder she went insane. She basically needed vital fluid all the time. The second one was when she activated her quirk. It was a random attribute, but when she alters her identity to someone else, if she knows how to act a bit, she can mimic their personality exactly. Definitely helpful for a quirk like this. But that now became a problem for Izuku. Why? Well, he had a theory. A non-active quirk he has called a motive deprive. The quirk that used to belong to Himaki. It makes it so that she couldn't feel any emotion whatsoever, which wasn't a quirk that anyone would want. But if Izuku combined it with Himiko's quirk, it would probably negate the emotional attachments her quirk has, effectively eliminating her need for vital fluid. But in doing that would also destroy the bonus of being able to blend in as someone perfectly. Izuku didn't want that, so he looked deeper into the quirk and found something else interesting. There seems to be a strange limitation to Himiko's quirk. She can't use the person's quirk she has transformed into unless she has a strong emotional attachment to them. If Izuku got rid of that, she'd no longer have that limitation. Izuku weighed the pros and cons, and ultimately deciding if Himiko will no longer be a villain anymore, the need to perfectly blend in is no longer necessary. So Izuku grabbed a motive deprive and forced the quirk into Himiko's transform. The quirk combined and nothing really changed, only the emotional aspects of it destroyed. Himiko watched Izuku intently as he silently played with 3 different lights in his hands. She watched as he combined 2 of those lights together before putting the light inside of her. She felt her body, trying to figure out what had happened. She then started licking her lips before noticing something. She wasn't hungry. She stared over at Izuku as he opened his eyes. Himiko dashed over to him and embraced him tightly. I'm not hungry anymore. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she said, squeezing Izuku tightly. Izuku laughed and returned her hug. When Himiko eventually let go, she frowned and pointed at Izuku's waist. Sorry, she said almost shamefully. Izuku raised an eyebrow before realizing what she meant. His clothes were now covered in vital fluid. Izuku internally started to freak out. What was he going to do? These were the last good clothes he had, and now were covered in vital fluid. He couldn't buy more, and it's not like he can just walk around with soaked clothes. Wait, he has Himamori. Why didn't he use it before? Wait, I've got this, Izuku said. He then started to draw some vital fluid. Himiko was concerned before he started forming his vital fluid into clothes. He gave them both new pairs. Izuku put up a wall of tentacles to give themselves privacy as they changed into their new clothes. Izuku buttoned up before turning to Himiko. "So Himiko, where do you live?" Izuku asked. "Oh, on the street," Himiko replied casually. Izuku looked at her, concerned. He supposes it does make sense. That fact isn't really surprising, but it doesn't make it any less sad. "Oh, I have a place in a junkyard. You can come with me if you want," Izuku said. Why did he say that? Izuku doesn't want to be rude, but Himiko isn't really sane and not very intelligent. It wouldn't be a smart idea to bring someone else with those qualities to his hideout, where he is trying not to be found by his ex-family, so they don't hurt them. "Really, I'd love to, Izuku-in." Himiko smiled widely. All of Izuku's doubts instantly vanished as soon as he saw her smile. Wonder why? Izuku and Himiko then started to walk to Izuku's home. Home, Izuku thinks. He smiles at the thought. Home, it certainly is. What about those two dead bodies? Well, Izuku couldn't exactly call the police, so he'll let someone else do that. But he took the other person's quirk before leaving. What? It's not like they'll use it. Izuku and Himiko made it to Dragoba Beach and walked around all of the garbage until they made it to the caravan. Izuku walked up to it and was about to open the door until he felt a small tug on his shirt. Izuku turns around to see Himiko looking at him with a pout. "Izuku-in, you've helped me so much today in such a short period of time. Is there anything I can do to help you, please?" Himiko said, looking at Izuku pleadingly. Izuku had to look away as he felt his cheeks turn hot. He started to think if there was something she can do before an idea popped into his head. "Actually, you can. I noticed you were really good at fighting. Could you teach me?" Izuku asks. Himiko smiles widely. "Of course." She yelled happily. Izuku smiled as well, feeling incredibly happy. It was strange. Izuku was always wishing he had a cool quirk like his friends or sister his entire life, but now, in a moment like this, Izuku was kind of glad he never found out he had all for one. It felt right. Doc, Aizawa, and Naomasa all sat in Doc's office. Doc had sent the person who she gave the powerful painkillers to. He had agreed to come, and now they were just waiting. Doc was apprehensive because she knew the man. She had told the other two he had a horrible past and is prone to violent outbursts if something triggers memories from his past. Also, the fact that he despises heroes with a burning passion made her concerned that Aizawa should leave, but he insisted on staying along with Naomasa. Heavy knocks radiate from the door. Doc instantly stands up and walks towards it. Naomasa and Aizawa stay where they are and watch her as they open the door. When it opens, they don't see anyone, but it was because there were 3 steps to the door. The man was currently at the bottom. A deep and raspy voice then spoke. "Hey Doc, you need something?" The man asked. His tone seemed tired. Doc nodded and looked back at Aizawa. He didn't waver and held her worried gaze. She sighed and looked down again. "Dabi, you've heard that a boy named Izuku Yagi went missing," she said. "What about it?" Dabi says in a dry voice. "Well, it was found that he had powerful painkillers in his room. You're the only person that I give those to, so a hero and a detective want to know." Doc didn't get to finish her sentence as heavy footsteps slammed up the steps. Naomasa flinched while Aizawa didn't waver. A hand pushed Doc out of a way, and a man walked into the room. He had shaggy black hair that was too dark to be natural. He had icy turquoise eyes and wearing a lot of black clothing. A large biker's jacket with a plain white shirt underneath it. Generic black pants and combat boots. But that wasn't what caught the detective in Aizawa's eye. He had several patches of burned purple skin that was connected to his healthy skin by staples. He glared at the two with hatred and intensity. Naomasa had to admit, he was slightly scared. If it wasn't for Aizawa next to him and knowing this guy didn't have a mutant quirk from his appearance, he perhaps would have pissed himself. But unexpectedly, his heated gaze stopped, and the man sighed. He then put his hands in his jacket's pockets. "Ugh, I thought it was someone else," Dabi said before walking to a wall and leaning up against it, no longer as hostile as he was before. "Oh, are you fine with Eraserhead, Dabi?" Doc said. Dabi scoffs and rolls his eyes. "I don't have a problem with Eraserhead. I presumed All Might would have been here," Dabi said. Doc looked at Dabi confused while Naomasa and Aizawa's eyes widen. Dabi looks over them and smirks at their reaction. "What's wrong? That's why I'm here, isn't it?" "Izuku Yagi," Dabi says, smirking at the two. Naomasa narrows his eyes. "How do you know?" Naomasa says, but Dabi was interrupted. "And what makes you think I'll tell you?" Dabi snarks. Nao Mesa flinches back at the man's sudden mood change. Izawa glares at Dabi and puts his hand on his capture weapon. Dabi, did you or did you not give Izuku Yagi your painkillers? Izawa asks threateningly. Dabi's mood instantly changes again as he smirks and shrugs his shoulders. Yes, Dabi answers. This shocks Izawa as he didn't expect an honest answer. Nao Mesa then elbows Izawa and looks at him sternly. Nao Mesa's quirk doesn't work if he wasn't the one to ask the question. Doc then walks over to Dabi and frowns at him. Wait, Dabi, why the hell would you do that? I know you, and you aren't that type of person, Doc said with crossed arms. Dabi chuckles and looks over to her, giving one last glance to the detective and hero. Do you remember the scrawny bush-head kid I brought in 2 years ago? Dabi asks. Doc's eyes widened. Wait, was that Izuku Yagi? Doc asked, covering her mouth with her hand. Dabi smirked and nodded his head. Hold on, what was this about Izuku? Nao Mesa asked, gaining the two's attention. Doc nods her head and readjusts her glasses. Well, 2 years ago, Dabi brought a kid in who was basically on death's door. He was bleeding profusely and had severe burns and freezer burns. Not only that, he had 2 fractured ribs and 2 ribs that were indented, which means they have been broken before and healed incorrectly, Doc said. Nao Mesa cringed at the mental image it gave him while Izawa scowled. If Dabi didn't bring him here, he would have died. But when he woke up, he booked it out of here claiming he'd be late for school. I just didn't have the tools to track him down, Doc said. Wait, then how did he end up with those painkillers, Dabi? Izawa asked. Dabi gave him a deadpan look. The same way I knew his name was Izuku dipshit. I know who he is, and he kind of knows who I am, Dabi said. Nao Mesa looks between the two as they glare at each other. Nao Mesa looks over to Doc, who raises her hands up with confusion. Nao Mesa sighs and stands up. All right, Dabi, it is clear you need to come to the station with me and erase her head. It is clear that you have information that you shouldn't and that your name isn't Dabi. Nao Mesa, trying to fake confidence because low-key, he was scared of this man. Dabi scoffs at the mention of his name being fake. How about this, detective? Dabi starts, looking at Nao Mesa threateningly, making him gulp. You give me 2 weeks, then I'll willing walk down to the station and answer all of your questions, Dabi says. Nao Mesa was about to decline when Izawa spoke. Sure, he said in a tired voice. Nao Mesa choked on air and turned to him. He was looking at Dabi with a neutral expression while he was smirking. What? No, I didn't agree, he states. In the end, he didn't have a choice. Izuku's quirks. Bolt, heavy skeleton, hemomorphy, tentacles, constellation. Not active. Energy spear, fat inflammation, pitch. So, this was the end of part 3 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.